we kind of just stopped it where you had followed in the footsteps of that fella. Canfield, yeah. But there's a lot of interesting stuff that happened while you were a horseshoer too, because I remember you told me you met, Johnny Cash and Mickey Gilley and all those guys. So I don't want to just jump over that part.
I didn't meet Mickey shoeing. I met Mickey after I went to work for Red.
Okay.
So Mickey was not anybody that I was even aware of.
Yeah, well, he wasn't anybody until that Urban Cowboy came out, and then he really kind of exploded.
And of course, when I met Mickey, it was at Charlie Pride's golf tournament in Kerrville, Texas, and Mickey showed up at that golf tournament.
What year was that though? That's like 77.
76. It was the bicentennial year, 1976, and that's where I met Ernest Tubb and Mel Tillis and so many, Johnny Duncan and so many of the others was at that one concert. And it was put on by Charlie Pride. Hondo Crouch had something to do with it. I'm not quite sure what, but he was pretty involved in it. But Luckenbach's not that far from Kerrville, so
right, yeah.
I'm sure it was just right around the bend. And Hondo was one of those people that knew everybody in the world, So if anybody invited him, okay, and if they didn't invite him, it was okay for him to be there. So that's the first time I met Hondo, and he had told me that he'd just bought Luckenbach, which was a little chicken house, no grocery store at that time, but there's a little bar, and it overlooked a dry creek, basically. But there was water in it that after a rain or something. So people would buy beer at the little cabin there that he had on that riverbank, and they'd flip their tops into that river. Sea of nothing but tops. And Waylon and them would come down to Luckenbach and hang out and pick Friday and Saturday nights. So once Hondo kind of got it started, he wanted us to come by there and play, so we did, and it was a chicken house.
You mean like a whorehouse?
No, actually a chicken house.
Oh.
Where they'd had birds, and it was a long, narrow building, and the profile was real low, 6-7 foot from tall. So you had to stand on the ground because there wasn't no room to build a stage, because your head would run the rafters. So we played there, and the sides opened up as small doors.
It was literally a chicken coop?
It was literally a chicken house.
That you had to duck your head to play?
Yeah, kind of, sort of, yeah. Yeah, I mean...
So did everyone sit down then?
Huh?
Did everyone sit down to play?
Oh, yeah. Well, the boys in the band, some of them sat and some of them stood. But it was a pretty packed venue. There were people there from everywhere. Austin, San Antonio, and, when you pulled in there, they had a granary on the left-hand side of the road that had been closed for quite some time. And then you pull off in this field, and there's the big city of Luckenbach right there. 3 buildings, I think. But anyway, we enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And then shortly after that, maybe just a little before that, instead of after that, maybe it was a little before that Waylon and Willie came out in Luckenbach, Texas.
Well, I don't know when he wrote the song, but he recorded it on the album Old Waylon, which came out 77.
Well,
and that was his biggest hit.
It was probably right along about 76 then when they wrote it and released it. Because I kept asking people, where in the world's Luckenbach, Texas? It's right outside of Austin. Really? Where?
Is there even a sign for it on the roads?
There is now. There wasn't then.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. If you blinked, you would have missed
when you
it.
went into Luckenbach, there's a sign on the granary over there. It said Luckenbach, and that was it. You know, there wasn't no road signs or anything like that leading you to Luckenbach, but now there is. I think it flourished after that song. And of course, everybody in country music field couldn't wait to get to Luckenbach.
Had to go see it.
Had to go see it.
It's like the mecca of country music
It'll
for a
take
while.
you 3 seconds. You know, blink your eye when you go through there.
Well, what was the name of the guy who you apprenticed under, the horseshoer?
Don Canfield.
Canfield. So did he retire
Canfield.
and say, Don, take my practice? Or how did that transition happen?
Well, the way that transition took place, naturally, I'd worked for him 4.5 years. And I went to the shop one morning, and he said, well, I'm done. I've got a job offer at Crabtree Farms in Kentucky. And Crabtree Farms is notorious racehorse stable.
Isn't that where you met him?
Mm-mm. No, I met him in Arizona at the shoeing school. Is where I first met him.
I thought you said you...
But I'd ran into him in one of the barns up there that he was working after I'd already moved back to Tennessee and started my practice. And it just wasn't working in Tennessee. Those farmers and the people that I had known for years, they shod their own horses if they ever shod them at all, you know. And they expected... One guy told me, he said, I'd shod his horses one time, and he called me about 6 months later. And he said, them shoes you put on them horses fell off. I said, I expect to have, because it's been probably 6-7 months, and you're supposed to shoe them every 6 weeks. Well, I never heard of such a damn thing. Well, sorry. And that's the caliber of people you was working with, you know. That once you put shoes on a horse, I guess they expect it to last a horse's lifetime.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Like a pair of Nikes.
Yes. Horses' feet grow like your fingernails. Once they get out there so far, and of course, you know, the nail heads wear off, and they become slender and slide through the holes in the horseshoe. So when you try to explain it to those people, it's like, well, can't you put a bigger nail head in there? Well, you probably can, but the thing of it is, the hoof is overgrowing the shoe. So at some point, he's going to shuck that shoe. It doesn't matter, you know. So the best way to do it is set it up on a 6 weeks appointment. Well, I can't afford you to come out here every 6 weeks for $4, shoe my horse. Okay. So then I went to Kentucky, because I knew that was horse country. Once I finished my episode with Canfield,
so he went off to Crabtree.
He went off to Crabtree Farms and was the head farrier at Crabtree Farms. And I took over his business in Tennessee. And a couple of years went by, and Canfield, I'd hire an apprentice by the name of James Lefebvre. And James was working with me at that time. And one morning, Canfield showed up at the shop. And he said, what in the world are you doing here? He said, I'm looking for work. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I gave you all my clients. Now you've got them all. And I'm in the same situation that you were when you was looking for work. Because now you're the head farrier here. And I need a job. I said, what happened to Crabtree? Well, some of the heirs at Crabtree had passed, and other heirs received the rights to Crabtree, and they sold it out, right out from under him. So his contract was null and void at that time. So he came back to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and went to teaching at the university, but he still needed additional work. So I had my shot. I said, all right, here's the deal. What you earn is what you learn, and you got 5 years. He said, you're rotten. You're plumb rotten to the core. I think those words I told you one time.
Because you pulled it right back on him.
Well, you know, what goes around comes around. So, and I remember the tools that you sold me at the University of Arizona that I needed in my shoeing box. I think the first day I went to work for you, you threw them as far as you could out in the middle of the field. Am I right? And you told me when you was ready, you'd put another tool in my box. So, same principle. I'm going to throw every tool you got out in the field the way you did mine, because I had to make a lot of hours at that panty factory I worked at while I bought your tools that you suggested to me to buy. And they were in my box when you threw them away. So I'll put a tool in your box whenever I feel like you're far enough along that you've accomplished enough knowledge that you know how to use it. He said, you are rotten to the core. I said, I'm only joking, but I wouldn't have done you the way you did me.
Yeah.
But he was right. Those tools that I bought through the university was no more than just clubs.
Garbage.
They were, because like he explained to me, so many people enter the college in order to take a course that they're never going to use for credits. Strictly credits. They're never going to use that. So if you hand a person a set of nippers like Canfield used, you're talking $300 for those nippers. And you're talking anywhere between $18 and $30 for a rasp that you've got to have when you're shoeing horses. But they wouldn't have known the difference, like I didn't know the difference. I didn't know the difference between a professional set of nippers and the clubs that I had that I was trying to become a professional with. There's no way. You're only as good as the tools you have in your box.
That's what they say.
Yep. So
they say that about musicians too, and the instruments you play.
That's right. It all boils down to the same thing. If you don't have the proper tools, you can't do the proper job.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot that I wasn't so gullible about buying tools unless I talked to a professional about what kind of tool that I bought. Was it really beneficial to me to buy it, or was it just going to be something else to weigh my box down that I couldn't use, right? So I learned all that after I went to work for Canfield.
So he came back around asking you for work,
Yep.
and then started doing the university circuit
Yep.
again.
Yep.
And then what happened?
He moved and went back to Illinois, where he is originally from. And last I heard of him, he was writing books. In fact, the last time I seen him, he said, I'm going to tell you something. I don't want you to ever call me for anything, nothing. Don't call me on my birthday. Don't call me for Christmas. Don't call me for Easter. Don't call me, period. You know everything I know. So the only thing that you'd be calling me for is some kind of deal that you should have already known about. I taught you everything I knew. So don't ever call me. So I never called him. But he got in pretty bad shape physically. And I think he finally had to just retire. But he wrote several books. One of them is The Elements of Farrier Science by Don Canfield. It's for the horse people that want to know the anatomy and the structure of the horse's hoof. That's the best book on the market. for that. And then he wrote several books after that. But Elements of Farrier Science for all those horse people out there that are just getting started or has been in it for years and would like to have some additional knowledge, that's what I suggest to do. Or they can go online, look up Don Canfield, and he's got his own website.
You think he's still alive?
No, he's gone.
He's gone?
Yeah. But his intelligence is still alive through that book.
Well, he put you in a good spot.
He did.
And when the training wheels came off, you were ready to roll.
Excuse me?
Once the training wheels came off,
you
were in good. You were in a good shape.
Yeah.
And
well, when you work for somebody that had his knowledge for 4.5 years, it took 45 years off of me.
Yeah, saved you a whole lot of time.
Saved me a whole lot of time. So, at the age of 26, I knew as much as he did at 50. So, he put me way up on the totem pole. And had it not been for him, then I'd have probably been struggling with them $4 a day people, or $4 for shoeing their horses or whatever. But he put me in a different bracket.
And does that dovetail into when you started meeting people like Johnny Cash?
Yeah, it came from that same process because it's a small community in Tennessee, and I lived in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is right outside of Nashville, about 25, 30 miles away. And everything was word of mouth. And they had beginning to start Opryland USA at that time. They're just breaking ground on it. So some of the people in the Nashville community knew that I dealt with horses. So what Opryland USA wanted to do was to patrol the opera grounds with horses. So they came to me and asked me if I knew of what type of horses they needed, something that wasn't skittish, and that people was going to be riding them 12 hours at a time around the clock. So they needed several head because it was all patrolled by horses. And that could I help them find the horses that it would take to do the job, where the rider would be comfortable and the horse would be sane enough not to spook it, just anything. So I helped them find some, and then I shod for Opryland for a while on those horses that me and O.J. Wright had sold to them. And O.J. was a horse trader. Clyde Stone was a horse trader. And when I told Clyde what I was looking for, Clyde already knew where they were. He said, "Yep, I know exactly where they were." So we sold several head. And then Loretta Lynn had a rodeo that was starting up. And her manager of that rodeo knew me through Opryland, the shoeing deal. So he asked me to take care of those horses for him. And then word of mouth, next thing you know, as the people there in Tennessee would call me, he's a celebrity shoer. So that's why that got started.
So do you remember the sequence of who was the first famous musician you'd met?
Boots Randolph was the first.
Was that prior to Opryland?
After.
Oh, it was after.
After I started. Yeah, Boots had, the real part, I didn't know that his celebrity when I got the phone call about, I'd never heard of Boots.
I only know him through, reading books about Elvis's recording sessions.
Right.
And that he pulled him in on a few.
Yes. And this lady called the shop one day and she said, "I'm Dee Randolph. And I live out in Whites Creek Pike. And your name has come up as one of the best horseshoers in the country." And when she said that, I said, "Where on Whites Creek Pike?" And she told me, and I said, "Well, right across the road from you is there a training facility? And she said, yes, there is. And I said, well, that guy that runs that training facility happens to be a horseshoer. And she said, yes, I know about him. We've used him, and he's not our type of farrier. So we have 5 head of horses, and we never ride them, but we want them taken care of. So would you come out and talk to us about taking care of our horses? Well, as I'm going out Watts Creek Pike to their house, there's a sign on the, and she told me, she said, the sign on the mailbox was a Homer L. Randolph. Okay. So I kept looking for Homer L. Randolph's mailbox, and sure enough, there it was. So I met with the folks, him and her, and I kept seeing on the wall musical notes, you know, like
built into the fence.
No, on their, we were in their kitchen.
Oh, I see. You're in the house now.
We're in the house.
Oh, okay.
And on the kitchen wall would be musical lyrics and notes of different things, you know. So I got ready to leave, and he said, I'm Homer L., and this is my wife, Dee, and she takes care of the ranch when I'm not here. And a lot of times I'm not here. I have a club downtown called the Carousel Club. Well, I knew from people that I was associated with, Boots Randolph owned the Carousel Club, even though I'd never met the guy before. And I said, you're Boots Randolph? And he said, happen to be, but kind of keep that quiet, would you? I said, sure, I sure will. But he said, yes, I'm Boots Randolph. And probably you know me more as Yakety Sax. I said, yes, I do, totally. And he said, well, welcome to the family, and we'll be expecting you to take care of our horses. So we became buddies. And Boots he was a great musician, but he was also a great person. And every time I'd show up, if he was at home, he'd wind up out in the barn with me, you know, and talking about where he'd been or what kind of venue he'd played or whatever. And he done a lot of fairs and stuff like that. And I'm sure a lot of personal appearances. But he was an interesting guy. In fact, he was the first guy that I know of that brought Red Angus cattle to Tennessee. And I think they came somewhere up in Illinois where he'd bought a herd. And one time when I was down and he had just got them, he said, get in this little old buggy and let's go up there and look at my cows. So we spent a half a day looking at these cows. But he had some gorgeous Red Angus cattle. That was Boots. Dee, she always worried about whether I had enough to drink or not. So she was always bringing me tea or something like that. Great people. Yeah. Great people. And then one time I was there, and I heard, well, when I got there was about 4 or 5 cars parked in my way, trying to get to the barn. So I went to the door and I asked Dee if anybody would be able to move those cars so I could get through to the barn. And she said, well, come on in here. I've got some other people I want you to meet. And Floyd Kramer, Chet Atkins, Boots Randolph, and Charlie McCoy. Now, a lot of people don't know who Charlie McCoy was, but a great harmonica player. So they were developing the $1 Million Band at Boots' place that day. They just, I think the first or second time they were together. But they went ahead and accomplished what they started. And they're known as the $1 Million Band.
So that's how you met Chet Atkins?
Yeah. Well, that's the first time I met Chet Atkins. And then once I got involved with the music field totally, Mr. Chet fixed my guitar neck.
Right.
And I still have Ernie that Ronnie McDowell broke the neck on my guitar. And me and Duncan's up there, and he asked Boots, he said, he asked Chet, he said, you know of anybody that is good at fixing a guitar neck? And he said, well, it all depends on how bad it's broke. He said, well, it's busted pretty good. And on the back of the neck, it was splintered. So when Ronnie McDowell had borrowed it, we was in Florida, he had borrowed it, and he pulled one of the little Elvis tricks where he swings the guitar off his shoulder down the floor. Well, he wasn't as tall as Elvis. So my neck, the guitar neck hit the floor before he got it all the way behind him, and he busted the neck on it. But Chet said, how long are y'all going to be gone? John said, I don't know, a couple, 3 weeks. He said, well, just leave it with me and let me see what I can do. And I think I've showed you the patchwork that Chet did with it. So
that's the one you still play?
Yeah, Ernie Epiphone, I call him.
That's your acoustic, the sunburst or brown burst?
Brown burst.
Or tobacco burst, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty guitar.
Yeah.
So from Boots Randolph, then you kind of got plugged into some folks in the music community, but you still weren't thinking that was where life was going to take you, right?
Well, I shot for Boots. I shot for Cash.
How'd you meet him?
Cash?
Yeah.
Through Boots. Yeah, it's all word of mouth.
So
yeah,
you just go out and take care of their head of horses?
Right. Take care of Boots' horses, and Cash was there.
And they all wanted to come out and meet you. Like, if this is kind of a lost part of society.
Well, yeah, it's everything is word of mouth to the music industry. Like, if I was a horse trainer and I trained horses for Lynn Anderson, then maybe Red Stegall or Johnny Cash or anybody that was in the horse industry, Carl Smith, would say, who trains your horses? Well, Charles Crowley from Georgia. Well, the next thing you know, Charles has got a whole barn full of celebrities' horses that he's training because they trust certain people. And, you know, everybody wants to be involved with whatever that famous person is doing. So I never asked for an autograph. I never asked for a picture. I never asked them for anything because I felt like the public had already abused that to the point to where that they were at home, they were in their own location and facility, and I didn't need to go in and make a big deal out of it. You know, I felt like that I was family enough if they invited me on their place. So I never.
Did you get to have any real in-depth conversations though? You said Boots would follow you out to the barn. Did Johnny too? He'd come out and want to talk to you.
Yeah, they would.
Just kind of jaw your socks off. And
well, mostly interested in what I did. It wasn't about them.
So you didn't really dive too deep, or
no. I would hit something lightly, or like Curly Putnam one time. He lived on Chicken Road, and which was right down the road from my place. There was Curly Putnam, Chris Ledoux's family lived on that same road, within a mile of each other. Charlie Daniels. The devil went down to Georgia.
Yeah, this is the different Charlie,
This
not your childhood Charlie.
Not the
not
other
Chuck
Charlie.
Daniels.
Not the Charlie that I got the guitar from, but Charlie. And then they lived just north of my shop, between my shop and Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Mount Juliet was about 15 miles out of Nashville, to the east of Nashville. So I'd always go to Mount Juliet, and I'd turn on Chicken Road in Mount Juliet, which is, they call it Central Pike now, I think. But you turn on Central Pike, and then that's where the celebrities lived, was up and down Central Pike. And then you'd come over to the main thoroughfare, and my shop was right on the corner of Central Pike and what I know as Chicken Road. People now know it as Central Pike, but it was Chicken Road then. And then Red lived south of me about a farm and a half from my blacksmith shop. So there's a group of celebrities right there in my community, and it was in Baird's Mill, Tennessee. It was the name of the little community where my shop was. And it was right next door to the Cedars Lebanon State Park. So we was always getting tourists through there that wanted to stop at the shop, see me shoe a horse, or schools would come by and they'd want me to show them how to make a little handmade shoe and stamp their name on it and give it to their children, that kind of thing. So my shop was pretty busy. Ralph Sloan was another great guy that every Saturday night he was on the Grand Ole Opry with a group called Tennessee Travelers. They were square dancers. And Ralph's mother lived within half a mile of me. In this old blacksmith shop that I turned in, it used to be a service station. So I turned it into my blacksmith shop. And they was, like all the old service stations, they had a room to where they kept all their oils and that kind of stuff, their stock. And Ralph and several of his friends used that back room in my shop for card games. So they'd spend hours at my shop in that little room back there playing cards and drinking or whatever else they wanted to do, I guess. But anyway, that's all welcome. My shop was a kind of celebrity hangout place.
So it's interesting to me to think that you're hanging out with all these famous musical artists, but it has nothing to do with the premise of your adoration for their musical talents. They're interested in you for your professional ability.
Right.
And you choose not to broach the subject of
No.
discussing their career. So it's a whole different dynamic in terms of the friendship and the relationship you had with these people.
Right.
Were you passionate about music at that time?
Oh, God, yes. Yes, I was passionate from music ever since I was old enough to hear my first song on the radio.
Well, that's something I forgot to ask you last time, Don, and maybe it's a good time to jump into it now. But, when you were a kid, who were your musical heroes? What really turned you on to music, other than...
The Grand Ole Opry. I could listen to it. The reason I could listen to Grand Ole Opry, my grandparents that raised me, they didn't believe in...
Yeah, Homer. He probably didn't even have a radio, did he?
Well, he did, but it was an old Philco radio, and it was operated off of the 6-volt battery. And we'd charge that battery up as a crank charger, right? Because we had no electricity at that time. That came later, but us boys would crank that battery up. Now, that battery had to be cranked and could not be used until a certain time on the Opry. I'm trying to think. Maxwell House Coffee was one of the sponsors of the Grand Ole Opry. Well, my granddad and my grandmother drank Maxwell House coffee. So they would turn in to the portion of the show where Maxwell House sponsored it. And Maxwell House would be on a certain time on the radio, and they knew that. So us boys would spend Saturday evening charging that battery up so Grandma and Granddaddy could listen to the Maxwell House portion of the Grand Ole Opry. And, there's goo-goo clusters and all this other stuff went on too, but it was Prince Albert and Maxwell House. That was their interest in the show. So I could sit and listen to the Maxwell House version of the show. Well, Maxwell House sometimes would have Hawkshaw Hawkins on there. Maybe he's in town that weekend, so he'd be on that portion of the Opry. There would be Patsy Cline that would be in that portion of the Grand Ole Opry. There would be Don Gibson that would be in that. And then my true love at that time was Johnny Horton.
Was Hank Williams already dead?
No. Well, let's see. Maybe. Because he died when? I can't remember.
I want to say like 54, 55,
yeah,
56.
Yeah, that was... But they'd play segments of records of him and say, this man right here stood right here for the Grand Ole Opry at Maxwell House, coffee time. And it would be him. Patsy Cline passed in 61, but I was fortunate enough to hear her live on Grand Ole Opry. And so I would sit and listen to the Grand Ole Opry with my grandfolks. And then when they'd shut it off and go to bed, there's still enough charge in that battery. I could slip down there and kick it back on and listen to when the battery went dead, right? So I'd listen to their portion, and then I'd cheat and listen to my portion as long as I could of the Grand Ole Opry, because that's the only communication we had with the outside world. You know, there was newspaper, and of course we had the local radio station, but it was mostly obituaries of the morning.
Oh man!
So that starts your day off on a kick.
Yeah, very uplifting.
Yeah, how many people you were not going to see anymore.
Yeah.
So and grandmother would always listen to the obituaries every morning at breakfast time. Of course, we're eating breakfast. List how many people had passed the night before.
Not a wonder your grandfather was such a warm, loving person. He listened to the obituaries every morning.
Yeah, that's true. They did. And you'd hear Grandma say, Daddy, so-and-so passed last night. No, really? Sure did. You know, you remember he came by here all the time. Well, I didn't know who so-and-so was. So, didn't mean that much to me, but it was a bad start for my day, you know, thinking about how many people that they knew had gone, and they're listening to that, like, okay, you know, I don't want to tune into an obituary program every morning at WHUV in live downtown Cookeville, Tennessee, you know. Some of those people that did that, well, everybody in the community did that, because that was the first thing kicked out the morning radio show. So here we go.
So that's what got you into music, was Grand Ole Opry.
Grand Ole Opry.
On your grandparents' radio.
Yeah. I'd bought a Johnny Horton record, and why, I don't know.
Because you had no place to play it?
I had no place to play it, but I had it. And so I remember it was Battle of New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it took probably 3 years for me to ever hear the song.
But was it magical when you finally played it?
Oh yeah, off somebody else's record player. But
yeah,
you know, I think I had it in my lunchbox or somewhere at school, and run into one of the classmates and said, "Man, bring that over. I got a record player." "Oh, you do?" "Sure. I'll bring her this afternoon." So I'd put it in my lunchbox and take it next morning, and we'd go by and play it. A little 45. And, you know, that started my love for the music. And then once I heard that record and knew I had something in my hand that I actually heard on the radio, that was the biggest thrill in my life.
Sure.
You know? Yeah. You can look at it, but don't touch it.
Mm-hmm.
That's mine. You know, I think it was like $1 or something like that at the time when I bought it. I remember buying it at let's see if I can think of the name. Lay's 5 and 10. they had a record shop in the back. Everybody that came out with records, you go to Lay's 5 and 10, go through the record on Saturdays, see if anybody else come out with a new record. Of course, they always were new records, but I couldn't afford them. So I played Johnny Horton till on my buddy's machine till I probably wore his machine out in the record too.
Wore the needle down to a nice smooth surface.
Yeah, it probably looked like the end of a screwdriver.
So when you were working with these celebrities and taking care of their horses and whatnot, did they ever extend you invitations to see them do a concert, or did they invite you to the Grand Ole Opry? Did you ever get to go?
I did get to go to the Grand Ole Opry one time in my entire life, and it was through the newspaper people there in Cookville. And if you could sell subscriptions to the newspaper, and you sold 20 or 25 subscriptions, then you got a ticket to the Grand Ole Opry. So they's coming around telling us that, and they tell us at school, you know, if you all really want to, I'm not quite sure whether the school got anything out of it or not, but, you know, they worked it through the schools. And if y'all want to go to Grand Ole Opry, then get out and sell subscriptions, and then you can get a ticket to the Grand Ole Opry. Well, I was 11 years old, and let me tell you what, everybody I come in contact with, I'd ask them if they were going to buy a ticket. And ironically enough, I won the ticket to the Grand Ole Opry. Well, we was milking cattle, right, at the time. And I asked my brother, I told him, I said, I got a ticket to the Grand Ole Opry. Now, it was 80 miles to Nashville from where we lived. And he said, well, that's real good, Donnie. How you going to get there? And I said, I'll manage.
And what are you going to tell Homer, though?
Well, that's the next question, right out of the box. He said, what about Homer? I said, Homer don't have to know about it. If you don't tell him, I ain't going to tell him. But I said, I think Uncle Everett works in Nashville. And if you'll do my chores for me, I'll ride with Uncle Everett to Nashville. And nobody will know that I'm down there. He said, well, if Homer catches you, you're going to be in big trouble. I said, well, unless you tell him, he won't know. He's in bed by 9 o'clock, and he don't get up to 4. So, you know, I think I can handle this. Well, Uncle Everett didn't know it, but I was in the back seat of his car. So I went all the way to Nashville.
You hid?
I hid in the back seat of the car. And I got to Nashville, where he worked in East Nashville. The Opry was downtown Nashville, which was probably 5 miles away, 5 or 6 miles away. So I didn't worry about how I was going to get there after I got out of his car. He went on into work, and I got out of his car and headed downtown Nashville. I could see all these bright lights down there, so I knew Nashville had to be pretty close. So I'm walking down Highway 70, which is right outside of Nashville. And I'm walking down Highway 70, and this car pulls over and picks me up. And he said, where are you going, young man? I said, I'm going to Opry. And I was so happy because I had this ticket in my pocket, right? And he said, you're going to Opry by yourself? And I said, yeah. He said, how old are you? And I said, probably lied to him, 11 or 12. 12 probably I told him. He said, well, anybody knows that you're at the Opry? Any of your folks know? And that's back when people was concerned about children. So, and I said, no, they don't, because my granddad wouldn't have allowed it. And he said, what do you mean your granddad wouldn't allow it? Where are you from? I said, Cookville. He said, where in Cookville?
Uh-oh.
I told him.
I would have told this guy to keep driving at this point. It's way too many questions.
I lived down on Nine Lick Road in Cooper. And he said, what's your granddaddy's name? I said, Homer. Homer what? Homer Carr. I know Mr. Carr. Well, everybody in Cooper knew Mr. Carr. And it happened to be that this man only lived about 6 miles from where we lived. So he said, yeah, you're right. Homer would be busting your ass totally every step of the way back home if he knew you was here. So what's your intentions? I said, I want to go see the Opry. I got this free ticket and I want to go see the Opry. And then I'm going to go back home. He said, how are you going to get home? I said, I'm not worried about that. I'll get home. He said, let me just drop you off at the Opry. And he said, we're going to some kind of event in Nashville. And he said, we'll come back by and pick you up. So you wait right out front inside the Opry. Okay. Well, I get to the Opry. I walk up to the ticket counter there at the Opry. They won't let me in because I'm by myself. So I showed them my ticket. Sir, young man, this is what they said. Young man, you have to have some folks with you. We can't allow you just in this opera house by yourself. You're too young. You need somebody to be with you. Well, I didn't take that as that I couldn't go. I just took that as I'll find somebody. So I go around behind the Opry, and all these people are back there. And I'm sure to this day, the best I can recollect, it was one of the opera stars that was back there smoking a cigarette on the backside of the Opry, said in his deep voice, what are you doing, young man? I said, I'm trying to get in to see the opera people in here. He said, well, I happen to be one of those people. So, have you got a ticket? I said, yes, sir, but they won't let me through the front door because I have nobody with me. He said, you can come go with me. So he took me in the back door and set me down out front.
In front row?
Yeah, in the front row. So I got to see all those opera stars that night. There was Chet Atkins there that night, and I was just a little fella. Chet was a young man at that time. And there was Hawkshaw Hawkins. There was Tex Ritter.
I know him.
Yeah, there was Tex Ritter.
Because his son
yes.
was John Ritter,
That's
who was
right.
the guy on Three's Company.
That's right.
But Tex Ritter was also in that movie that
Yes.
Waylon did called Nashville Rebel.
Right.
I think that was filmed in the 60s though, but he was
somewhere
still,
yeah,
on the circuit. But
Right.
anyway, sorry, interrupt.
So, but yeah, a lot of those people were there that night.
So it was like it blew your mind. It was better than anything you could have imagined.
Hearing it on the radio was one thing.
Yeah.
But seeing it right in front of your own face and of course the crowd, at that time, they were huge. The place was packed, right? So as they'd bring one celebrity out and another one leave, and it was the same as on the radio. It was brought to you by Maxwell House Coffee or this portion of the show. And that's the first time I remember ever hearing about Goo Goo clusters, right? They were a chocolate candy bar filled with marshmallows and peanuts on the inside. And I didn't have any money to buy anything, right? I had this ticket and that's all I needed. So this guy next to me that was sitting there, he brought me some popcorn and a Coke. You can't sit here and not have something, son. So at intermission, he brought me some popcorn and a Coke. So I went out after it was over with, probably around 11:30. I go out and I'm standing in front of this.
Was it the Ryman
Yeah.
Auditorium?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I stand in front of the auditorium waiting for this guy to come by, that's going to give me a ride back home. And hoping I could talk him into not telling Homer, right? So anyway, he never shows up. So I started out walking. I have no earthly idea at this particular point because I've never been to Nashville, Tennessee in my life. So I have no idea which way I'm going, right? I know east is east and west is west, but I'm flustered. I've never been in that many lights in those taller buildings in my entire life. So I was lost as a sense of direction. And the squad car pulls up. And the gentleman gets out and he walks over to me and he said, "Are you here by yourself, young man?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "What's your name?" I said, told him my name. He said, "Do you live here in Nashville?" And I said, "No." He said, "Where do you live?" I said, "Cooper." He said, "I think we need to take you to headquarters." Well, to me, headquarters meant police station, right? So I said, no, you can't. You can't take me to the police station. I've slipped away from home and come down here to see the Opry because I want a ticket. And so he said, well, let's just talk about this. So he talks to me, and I'm scared, crying, right? And he said, "Can I call somebody for you?" I said, "We don't have a telephone," which we didn't. And he said, "Well, how'd you get here?" And I told him. And he said, "Well, let me put it this way." He said, "You're scared of your granddad." I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "To the point to where you're in hysterics." And I said, "He can't know about this." He said, "Well, what if I call the sheriff up there and we try to get you back to where you need to be?" He said, "Will you be opposed to riding in a squad car?" I didn't know what a squad car was. And I said, "No, sir, I guess not, because I have no way home other than to walk." So they called the sheriff's department in Cookville. And his name is Bill Ballou. And Bill Ballou...
Wait. Bill Ballou?
Bill Ballou.
B-E-L-E-W?
Yeah. Bill Ballou.
Is it the same guy who made Suits? Was he?
I don't think so. Different Bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the guy who did all of Elvis's costumes.
Yeah. But that wasn't him. So anyway, Bill was a distant relative of my granddad's, right? So he knew right away that through the conversation this police officer talking to me and what was he was getting, he knew that I was in big trouble if Homer found out. So he told him, he said, "Well, let me tell you what, put him on the Greyhound bus and send him home. And I'll pick him up. I know exactly where he lives. And you probably don't need to know the scenario that happen if this kid ain't home by the time his granddad gets up. So let's just kind of keep it on the quietus." So he met me at the bus station. It was about 3:30 in the morning when I got back to Cookville. And he takes me home. And all the way home, don't pay for a minute, I didn't get my butt chewed out. "You never do this again. Don't you ever do this again." But I didn't have to do it again. And that was.
What time did you get home?
About 3:30.
Before he woke up?
Uh-huh. Yeah, he wakes up every morning about 4.
And you were in bed?
Well, no, I was at the barn. I didn't go into the house because he could have heard me open the door. So, no, I was at the barn. And thanks to Mr. Bill Ballou, that he didn't ever say anything to Homer about it, but he always held it over my head, you know.
It's almost like a secret recon World War II operation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And
an insertion. Insertion and extraction.
My mother never knew it until I was up probably 21 or 22, married, and they were at some gathering, a family gathering, Thanksgiving or something, And Bill was there at that deal, and he said, I saved your young kid's butt that night. And then he told her the story.
Was Homer gone?
Yeah, Homer's already passed.
So he never found out about it?
No. Homer never knew about it. Not that, of my knowledge. If he did, he never mentioned it. And trust me, if he had known it, he'd have mentioned it.
He'd have mentioned it.
But thanks to that police officer from Nashville and
the good graces of strangers.
Great uncle, you know.
That's crazy. You weren't going to be denied. You were going to go.
I was going to go. I won that ticket and I was going to go. And my older brother that covered my butt that night, he kept asking me, he said, what was it like? What was it like? I said, I can't tell you what it's like. It was one of the greatest things that ever happened in my entire life. And to this day, when I look back at it, I think, boy, you're an idiot. But a determined idiot. So it was a great experience. I never did it again, but
that's a cool story.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So if you want to know how long I've been interested in the music, back then, for sure.
So you must have been in some. I mean, I can tell that you're, you're not that overly impressed with celebrities because you were around them a lot. You were around them a lot. But was it pretty special when you? I mean, did you get pie-eyed when you first saw Johnny Cash walk into the bar?
God. You know, it was kind of like you've heard these people throughout your life. And then when you see them, it's like they're bigger than Earth. They're more magnificent than the sky. And there's an air that surrounds them that is like nothing that you've ever experienced, or nothing I'd ever experienced. It was almost like I was in the graces of what I'd like to think that when you die and go to heaven, you're amazed that you're even in that situation to start with. Then this thing comes over you, this mask comes over you like, I'm not supposed to be here. These people are far further advanced than I'd ever think about being. But you know, once you're around them, they're not. They're as human as you are, right? But the image you draw in your mind before you ever meet them is I'd have to say that's probably the most amazing effect that has on your mind and your body, because you draw these images. You know what they're supposed to look like in your mind, even though you don't ever see them. And then when somebody says, hello, I'm Johnny Cash, and he's standing right there across the room from you, let me tell you what, it's earth-shaking. And for a person of my stature, never to have met anybody of that stature, heard them, never seeing them, or shaking their hand or whatever, yeah, you wonder if you really deserve to shake their hand. Because in your mind, it's phenomenal.
But that gets shattered by reality within a few hours or so. You realize,
this guy is only human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that facade goes away.
Well, no, it never goes away. You still have that respect.
Yeah.
That image that you've drawn in your mind for so many years, that you never look at that person as you may look at me, or I may look at you. Well, that's Scott. Well, if it's Johnny Cash and it's Mel Tillis, well, that's Tillis. Well, that's Cash. They're so used to each other, right? It's not their first experience. But when it's your first experience, to somebody of that stature that you've heard all your entire life and never seen, he's bigger than Earth, as far as you're concerned, you know? So you feel like you're guilty for being there, that you don't belong there, because he's experienced more things in one day than you have in your entire life.
That's probably true.
So you're amazed and you're bewildered to the point where you feel like maybe you're a molecule that's floating around through the air, and that you wonder how they look at you, you know? Hoping they're not looking too deep, but it's like, okay, what do I say? How can I hold a conversation with these people?
Man, I don't know. That would be tough. If somebody had plopped me down in your shoes when you met Ellis, I don't know what I would have said. I would have asked, like, hey, would it be all right if I play a song for you?
Well,
I wouldn't know what to say, so I would try to do something.
Right, right. And I've been in that situation to where it's better not to do anything. It's better just to say, I'm humble. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to listen. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm not going to say a word and show them how stupid I am or how naive I am. I'm going to act like I've seen a little part of the world, you know, because these people are, their world.
But they started small too. Yeah. All those famous country stars.
But you don't really.
They started as sharecroppers' children, you know? Yeah, Elvis, Johnny Cash.
Yes. Johnny
That's what
Cash,
their parents did.
His granddad was, or his dad, I think, his dad was, he ran a sawmill.
Well, Johnny picked cotton as a kid.
Oh, I don't doubt he's in Arkansas.
He did,
so, yes. So he did the same things I did. But knowing and looking at him, you wonder, okay, so he did what I did, but look where he is and look where I'm at.
But you're doing pretty good. And like we've talked before, you know, life, you're as if there's some sort of metric or benchmark for how well you do at life. There is no such.
No.
There is no such grade.
No.
But I mean, I think we, you know, like you were talking earlier, how they just have an aura about them.
Sure.
Because you hear songs, they come through the airwaves, they come through a radio, and generally you hear the voice, and it strikes a chord with you, and it releases something in your brain where you like it, and you have to hear it again.
Right.
It gives you a sense of satisfaction or like an urge. I've never tried drugs, but I assume it's something like that where I gotta hear that again.
Yes.
And then each time you play it, it's a little less than the first time you heard it, you know, and you're chasing that feeling. But nonetheless, these people were, through technology, introduced to us in a way that we're never introduced to people through the radio waves. Right. With a famous name, a name that's known across the country for something you did, you know. So they were given this platform of achievement, just through notoriety of an art form, a medium, right?
Yes.
So it was. Yes. It's still kind of impressive. Like,
well, it's not so much in today's society, because now we have TV and we have phones and we have videos and all this kind of thing. But in my time, there was no such thing. Yeah. We didn't have the TV.
Just radio.
So I wouldn't have known what Johnny Cash looked like if he had slapped me in the face. I wouldn't have known who Mel Tillis was if he'd have slapped me in the face. I had this visual of what these people looked like, but it wasn't an accurate visual like we get today. If you want to hear a song, then you can tap your phone and here's the person actually singing it, and you're looking at them do it.
Yeah, it's that accessible.
Yes.
But even back then, if you were buying a 45, it just came in a paper sleeve.
Yes, it came in a paper sleeve.
It didn't have a picture of Johnny Cash on the front.
No picture at all.
Just have the label and the name and who
said Sun Records, Johnny Cash.
Right.
Well,
So it's like talk radio. You listen to it, you're like, I wonder what this guy looks like. Yes. Okay, I think I have an idea. Right. And then you see a picture of him and you're so disappointed.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're not necessarily disappointed. Not that. But it's not the image you thought.
It's totally different.
It's totally different, yes. And he's dressed in black. Well, that's scary enough by itself because you've only seen people in black when somebody passed. And it's a mournful thing, right? But when I first saw Cash, he wasn't dressed in black. He was at Boots Randolph's house, right? Which he was just like me. So I couldn't put the black with Cash, even though the man in black was on the Opry. So you're thinking, is this Cash? Because they always introduced him as the man in black. Yeah. Right?
Sir, so, where is your wardrobe?
What's he doing running around my street clothes?
That's right.
So
there must be some mistake. You're not Johnny Cash.
And so the mind is a wonderful, strange thing.
Yeah.
You know, so you, I guess you live through that, and then when you actually are associated with those people, and you live with them on a daily-to-day basis in a 40-foot bus, and there's 6 of you on there, including the artist, then you realize they are human beings, you know. They put their legs through that britches just the same as you do.
That's right.
Know? And I remember one time we was in Montana or somewhere, and I'd stepped off the coach and everybody else was asleep. But we was at a fairgrounds, and all these people were around this bus, right? Because it had the celebrity's name on it. So they were there to see the celebrity. They wasn't there to see me. And I was going to step out and tell them that, you know, they're asleep. They'll be up a little bit. So they'll be more than happy to give you the autograph. And this one person that was standing in that crowd was a girl. She's probably about 14, 15. And I kept seeing her look at my stomach. Like she just had her eyes focused on my stomach. And I looked down and see if I had a button loose or something, you know, or my zipper was open. So I said, "What are you looking at?" And she kept her eyes right on my stomach. She said, "You breathe?" I said, "Yeah, I breathe." Then it really shocked me. She said, "What do y'all eat?" And at that moment, I realized
you had become
that she was in the same situation that I was.
Yeah.
When I first met my first artist.
Full circle. I thought she was checking out your washboard abs.
No. She actually was real and asking me what we ate, and we breathe. I said, "We're not aliens, you know. We do eat, and we probably eat the same thing you eat."
Do you have bowel movements?
Well, that's been asked. But
we do, but they smell like fresh cinnamon buns.
So, you know, it's amazing what life throws at an artist that he's supposed to live up to, right? Because it's all fictitious to the point where what he delivers to you is not fictitious, but your images and what you hear other people say is what dwells in your mind on who this person is. And 90% of the time, they're not who you think they are.
But that's the fantasy of why they're celebrities to begin with.
That's right. So
it's that they're
celebrities because of you. They're not celebrities because of them.
That's right. Yeah, that's the perception.
Yes. It's like this little boy walked up to me not long ago, and I'd written this song 46 years ago. And he walks up to me and he said, "Did you write that song?" And I'm not going to mention the song. And I said, "Sure did." And he said, "Can I have your autograph?" I said, "Only after I have yours." And he turned around to his dad and he said, he wants my autograph. And his dad said, "So, you're going to sign the man your autograph?" He said, "But I wanted his autograph." So I kneeled down and I said, "Let me say," he's about 7 or 8. I said, "Let me tell you something. What's your name?" I don't remember his name, but he told me his name. And I said, "Well, let me say this. You're asking me for my autograph on that song that I wrote 46 years ago. 46 years ago. You wasn't even thought of, young man. You wasn't even a blink in your mom or dad's eye at that time. So, do you like that song?" He said, "Yeah, I like that song." And his dad looked at me and winked. And he said, "I've played a lot." So I said, "Okay, you're 2 generations behind me. It's you, your dad, and then me. So actually you're 3 generations behind me. And you know that song. And you want my autograph? Well, let me tell you something. I want your autograph because you know that song. For you to tell me that song is still alive in your heart is more than I could ever imagine at this stage of my life. Because 46 years ago, that song should have been gone a long time ago. But through you, it lives. So I want your autograph." And I got his autograph.
When did you come into the ability or the realization that you had a passion for writing songs, or that you had the ability to write songs? Did that come after you had been a farrier and met those people, or was it before?
My songwriting started when I was plowing mules in the field after my guitar was burnt. So I had a little paper book. It's probably about 3.5 by 3.5 that I kept in my shirt pocket. And we had no ink pens at that time. We only had pencils. So I'd broken a pencil in half so it couldn't be seen, and I stuck it in the corner of that shirt pocket. And when I'd be up in the field plowing with the team, we'd have to rest the team at the end of the field before we made another trip back the other direction. So I'd look around and say tree and see if I could rhyme something with tree, you know. And I kept this little notebook in my shirt pocket, and I'd always hide it so nobody could read what I was thinking about or writing. And so that started probably along about 14 or 15. Well, I'm going to say 14 because they burnt my guitar when I was 13.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. We've covered it, but it's, I mean,
yeah,
just tragic.
It is what it is. But I would keep doing that, and I would listen to the Maxwell House coffee deal, and I was seeing how those people went to putting things together. So I didn't realize to me that writing was actually a story that was being told by music. Then once I figured that out, the lyrics became easier. But I'd never shown them to anybody. So after I got to shoeing horses, and I ran into Curly Putnam, Curly was a writer. And so Curly stopped at the barn one morning. He said, "Don, I understand you're trying to be a writer." And I said, "Well, I'm trying, but I'm not in your caliber by a long shot," because Curly had written some great #1 songs, which is Green Green Grass at Home, and on and on we can go. But anyway, he said, have you got any of that with you? I said, there's a little book on my dash out there if you want to take a peek. So he came back in with this book, and he said, is it in this? I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm not going to open it, but I'd like to see some of your lyrics. I said, okay. So he was reading some of the lyrics as I thumbed through the pages. And he said, you know, you got some great ideas. You need to put them down and put some music to it. I said, I don't know music. And he said, you don't play? And I said, no. He said, you write these kind of lyrics and you don't play? I said, no. He said, you don't play nothing? I said, no, I don't. He said, well, you need to go to playing. I said, how do you do that? He said, you go get your guitar or whatever instrument you might be interested in, then you learn how to play that instrument. But don't quit writing. These are some great lines. Well, I was all swelled up then, right? He got in his car and left. So all I could think about all day was what Curly just told me, you know. So I thought, well, I can't play. I know I can't play. Don't even know where to start. So I'll just keep writing. Because he encouraged me to do that. He encouraged me more to write than to play.
Well, it's interesting.
Huh?
I'm kind of wondering, were you writing these as like rhyming? Mm-hmm. Was there a structure that you always went? You're like 4 sentences, they should rhyme. Then
well, it was more like I'm telling a story, and I want this story to mean something. So I try to write each line better than the one before it, right? So it became a book, or I was drawing you a picture, or writing you a book, or making a movie in 3 minutes or less, right? Because I didn't want you bored when you got to the end of it. I didn't want you to have to keep flipping pages. And some of the first songs I'd written was probably 1.5 miles long, right?
Yeah.
Because I was trying to
hadn't condensed them yet.
Huh?
Yeah, you hadn't found those perfect lyrics.
I hadn't found where those spots went, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the only thing that Curly put me on the right track is, he said, you know, a good song can be said in a few words. And that stuck with me. And I thought, well, what he's trying to tell me is, I've got X amount of time to paint you a picture, to show you a movie, and write you a book. And it be delivered in a certain amount of period of time. That's when that came to my mind, that I needed to shorten up my songs and not fill so many books. And say as much as I could within a period of a few lyrics. So you get the point.
We've talked about this before, but one of the reasons why country music hooked me, I mean, as a kid growing up in Oklahoma, I eschewed country music. I wanted nothing to do with it because they inundated you with it
right
in Tulsa. And it all sounded like garbage to me as a kid. It just was twangy and annoying. I didn't like it.
Right.
Because when you're a kid, you don't listen to lyrics. You listen to melody. Right? That's what hooks you. That's why the Beatles blew your mind when you first heard them, because of the things they could do melodically.
Right.
Instruments and cellos and their harmonies and the psychedelic effects they did, right? But as I got older, once you've learned and loved, with country music, the lyrics say so much with so little. I think that's the brilliance of a really good country song,
Right.
is they can condense all the things that are so hard to articulate in such a short amount of time, or they'll find a catchy way of doing it.
Right.
And so this is just an example, but Don Williams, I've really gotten into his music lately, and he has a line in his song "Add a Way to Go."
Right.
I think you could probably relate to this one too, from what you told me about your first wife. So she says, "Didn't you believe me when I loved you? I guess you thought we were playing games. All this time I tried to think I've known you. I guess I really only knew your name." That says so much with 4 sentences.
Oh yeah.
So much.
I can relate to that.
Like you can apply that to so many
Different
backdrops,
angles. Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
you think you know somebody.
That's a total movie right there.
I know, right?
4 lines.
You didn't believe me when I told you I loved you. You thought we were playing games.
So, I think basically, yeah, you learn to put things to where that in perspective of where they are, and it's like you're talking to somebody, and you don't even like the person that you're talking to. So, you're shifting yourself in the situation that I'm going to say as little as I can, get my point across, then I'm out of here, right? That's a good country song.
Yeah.
And that's the way I look at writing. I'm going to say what I've got to say, and I'm going to do it with 3 minutes and less. And when I leave here, you're going to have the world's picture in your mind. That's exactly what I meant.
You got to do a song about going to the Grand Ole Opry as a kid. You have to do a song on that. That is such a great story. You got to put that on your next album. That's worth doing, Don. And I don't know how you're going to do it succinctly.
I don't either. Have no earthly idea. But
we'll come up with a sentence or two about Granddaddy. And
yeah, I'm sure if I think about it, I probably can't. But that was quite an experience.
I imagine, and just all the generosity of perfect strangers to help you get there and get you home and take care of you, let you in, get you food, beverages.
You hear people say, and you've been around when you've heard them say to me, "Man, that must have been the greatest days in the world in your childhood." Well, let me tell you what. Music to me was invented 1950s, late 50s, early 60s, and into the 70s, right? So any of those people that came along after that time has missed everything, music-wise, that you can imagine, because the big changes were all in that realm of time. The Beatles,
Vietnam, JFK getting shot.
Right. The world was totally naive. And I'm not talking about only the children were naive. The people that lived as remotely as I was raised were naive. They had no earthly idea of the concept of what lay beyond that next hill until TV came along. TV brought fear, I'd say, first, because it was all about news. What was happening outside your community, not what was happening within your community. So those people that was not exposed to that was more in fear now than what they were before TV came along. Because now they was facing the world through their TV set, which things that they would never even think about was going on, right? So they were was in much of awe of what was taking place out there beyond their community than I was when I heard my first record, right? When I heard my first record, I had a great imagination. Well, once TV came into play, you had no more imagination. It was reality. So you couldn't sit and dream about what you thought the war was. You couldn't sit and dream about what you thought the Grand Ole Opry was. You couldn't sit and dream about anything that was making history, because it was in a black and white set right in front of your eyes. So when Kennedy was shot, everybody was there. Not the people in Dallas. The whole wide world was there. So now you became part of that world, and your fantasies no longer existed. So the younger generation in today has no fantasies or imaginations, because it's all been exposed, taken away from them.
Oh yeah.
So
you want to see what Thailand's like? Jump on YouTube and there's somebody showing you with a high def camera. We're going into the jungle or whatever, or here's just the like beaches of
this conversation that we're talking about tonight would be like, who was Johnny Cash in 1956? Right? Look her up. She's right there in little Bluetooth.
Yeah, you can hear the interview.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Right. So, what was the greatest talk show ever in 1963? Here it is.
Johnny Carson.
Johnny Carson. Right. Johnny Carson was. I remember me coming in off of the date, and my mother standing at the ironing board, watching Johnny Carson. When I'd come in the door, she'd have a finger on her lips.
Don't interrupt Johnny.
Don't interrupt Johnny, right. And
he was pretty entertaining.
He was. He wasn't entertaining. But the difference in that, in today's society, so much entertainment don't exist anymore.
No, everything is a political narrative now.
Right. So I was glad to be in that era.
Well, that's why I find it so fascinating. I mean, I love talking to you because I would have rather gone through, your experience. I just always found it more intriguing to hear people who've experienced things more profoundly, I think.
Sure.
You were mentioning earlier the struggles.
Yeah.
Make life. They shape you so much more. And
they make you what you are.
In each successive generation, I'm 40 now,
right.
41. So there's kids out there half my age.
Sure.
And they've never had any hardship.
Right.
Parents have protected them, and
right.
so they maybe they don't really understand the country lyrics. It doesn't touch them because they can't relate to it.
Well, they can't, because they've never experienced a plowed field and barefooted. They've never put their foot in a plowed field. They've never smelt the earth when you first turn it over in the spring.
I do know what that smells like.
But
I haven't plowed a field. But I can still appreciate.
Yes.
There's some things I can appreciate, and then other things I can still tip my cap to.
It's sad that you can't relate to Mother Nature to the point to where that instead of fighting a bee when it comes around you, you've seen children today slap at it, oh, it's a bee, oh, get it out of here, to look at that life that society has taught the children today. If a bee was swarming around my head when I was a child, I'd try to catch it, because I want to look at it real close. It might have burned me, right? Sting me. But that's part of the experience. That's part of the growth that a person needs to receive. If I can tell you all day that stove is hot, if you never felt heat, you wouldn't know what I was talking about. That would be as Greek as me telling you that spring water comes right out off of the ice. If you've never seen ice, you wouldn't know what I was talking about. And I made the statement to my own daughter. She kept telling her son, do not touch that, that's hot. Do not touch that, that's hot. Do not touch that, that's hot. I said, look, let him touch you. From that point forward, he'll know what heat is.
That's right.
So if you've never been exposed to those things, then you're trying to protect somebody that you can't teach because they've never been exposed to it. That's where I am in today's. That's the reason we're having these conversations, because nobody experienced what, now I'm saying nobody experienced what I've experienced in my lifetime. And I happen to be 75. So I've seen a lot of changes from the time that Mom gave me birth to where we are today. Most of them not good. I can't look at today's world and say, I love it.
No. We nostalgically look back at the good old days.
Yes. I'd rather live in the past than know what's happening in the future.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
Well, I feel that way too, though. So,
really?
Yeah. But I think that's probably just human nature.
Maybe.
I think that could be. Because we're all frightened of change.
Sure.
And we're comfortable with what we know. And we know our past down to a T.
Oh, yeah.
We were there.
Yeah. So. You can't tell me that fire's not hot.
But I enjoy it, Don, and I look forward to it each week.